Good Wednesday evening, everybody. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center as we continue to track very, very dangerous Hurricane Laura here. A serious, serious situation for parts of southwestern Louisiana and extreme southeastern Texas, folks. You can see that eye so well defined. If you're just kind of catching up on what's been going on, the storm has rapidly intensified here, getting higher than what the forecasts were showing there as we were looking back yesterday, up to a Category 4 now. And there is a chance, a small chance at least, that it could become a Category 5 here before landfall. Right now, the official forecast has it making landfall about 10 miles away or so from that. As you look at, we have about 150, you need about 157 miles per hour for a Category 5 hurricane. So we're getting pretty close there, folks, and could even, if it doesn't get done here with this system, as we are looking at it here tonight with the updates, it could be done in post-analysis as this does maybe get classified as a Category 5 later on. But you just see that eye, so terrifying, to be quite honest here. A historic storm that's going to cause extreme damage. Let's go ahead and go to the infrared satellite right now. We'll try to load this on here, and you'll be able to see what's going on as we just see it so well defined here as well. A really bad situation for Lake Charles here, folks. A situation here, a system that's going to bring this fury with it. I mean, I don't mean to scare you if you're watching here in towards southwestern Louisiana or have relatives in this region, but it's going to be really, really bad. And this is a life-threatening situation. The Weather Service is talking about maybe unsurvivable storm surge. That's how bad this is going to be. I know Cameron Parish, for instance, just south there of Lake Charles, is going to be just catastrophic. It's going to be pretty much wiped out. I really hate having to say that here on the air, but that's the truth, to be quite honest. That's how bad this is going to be. That's how much confidence we have. So let's go ahead and dive into some things here. We'll keep an eye on the satellite images, just so vivid there. We'll pop up the Doppler radar. We've been showing this to you. We were streaming it earlier in the double box as we were looking off the Lake Charles site there. And as you get down here, you'll be able to see a well-defined eye. And we have winds so strong in here. Let's go ahead and pop up the Doppler radar tool that we have, our GR level 3, where we can kind of dive in a little bit deeper on this. You'll be able to see some of the cities here. You'll be able to see the wind, and these winds are just so strong. We're seeing just above here the surface winds 135, maybe even stronger, as it does have max sustained at 145. So maybe not even getting the full scope of this here on the Doppler radar with some of these measurements right now. But these bright colored indicative of extreme wind speeds. We're going to have extreme wind warnings, I'm sure, put into play here later tonight for some of these areas, and those are the worst type of warnings pretty much. I mean, next to storm surge warnings, pretty much we're talking about a situation here where you're going to have just wind, tornado-like winds moving through and causing devastation. A high confidence in that occurring. We just want people to be safe out there. I mean, if you're in this area, if you haven't evacuated in these storm surge vulnerable areas, I know that value is already starting to become an issue to an extent here, but if you haven't evacuated and you think you can still get out, you need to do it. You need to get out, because this, again, the Weather Service Hurricane Center talking about maybe this being storm surge you can't survive here in towards southwestern Louisiana, maybe even southeastern Texas as well, and we'll dive into some of the numbers here. Luckily, Houston, it looks like they're pretty much going to dodge a bullet here, maybe some storm surge issues in Galveston, but nothing like what we're going to see further off toward the east. It's going to be night and day, the difference here, folks, as we look towards southwestern Louisiana. Again, there's the winds. It's so terrifying to see here. We just want you to remain calm, though, but it's really advised to try to get out of this region in towards southeastern Texas, southwestern Louisiana here. As we look back over at our other system, we're going to pop up the satellite again, and I'm going to show you some things over there right now. We're going to go pretty long with this update, by the way. This isn't a normal type update. As we talk about the local weather in North Florida, South Florida, pretty calm as the moisture is really being kind of taken over toward this area here, not being funneled up our way, and that is the good news. Pretty warm in toward North Florida, South Georgia, but nothing too much to worry about here. But as we look back toward the west, you can see as we get to about 2 a.m. or so, they're already starting to get in some activity, but as we get to about 2 a.m. or so toward the Cameron area, that's 1 a.m. Central Time, by the way, we're going to have this storm approaching. We're going to have that storm surge just funneling in there, causing all sorts of issues. and you're just going to be seeing that as we look toward river flood in Lake Charles, for instance, historic numbers that have never been recorded before, anticipated in the forecast there as we look toward Calcasieu Parish. Just really serious situation. We're going to look at some of these wind fields here now. We're going to put on the wind radii. You can see here the hurricane force winds here, the most destructive winds, Beaumont to Lake Charles. So I think Lake Charles might get a little worse, and I'll dive into that here in a moment because they're in a more favorable area overall with this system. But you saw that eye. It's huge. It is about 30 miles or so, and that just really tells you how wide it is. And it is not good at all. Shreveport, tropical storm, they're going to knock out a lot of power getting all the way into Arkansas here with this. You see a tropical storm all the way to Little Rock, and as they get to those areas, they're of course not going to see near the fury as you get down to the coast, but these areas are more vulnerable in terms of that wind damage. You're not going to necessarily have a situation here as we get towards some of these winds. They're still going to cause a lot of power outages here, unfortunately, so that's something you just got to be prepared for as you're looking. Let's pop up the radar again. You'll be able to see what is going on here with some of these winds. They're not too strong as you get right along the coast, but just outside into the Atlantic here, into the Gulf of Mexico, I should say. We're talking about 52 knots to gust there, so we're getting really strong wind speeds already here, and we just want people to be taking heed. We have some tornado warnings in play, and we're going to have to watch to see how these do produce. There's even a tornado watch in play here as well. North of Baton Rouge, we're talking about some of these areas of rotation to the east as well. You see these areas of circulation as they pop on our rotation tracker. You can see one popping out a little bit better there, and then even more so as you get down toward Hammond, for instance. So a nasty situation there with these. They're not going to get the full brunt of this storm, and luckily that's the case as you look out that way, but still could have some damage, still could have some issues, pretty big issues from tornadoes, but nothing like what they're going to see down toward Calcasieu, Cameron, Paris is there as we look. And we're going to go ahead and pop up that cone perspective now. If you're just tuning in, I know you might want to see that, what is going on there on our other system, on our graphic system, and it'll be able to show you here the major hurricane. This is about 1 a.m. Central Time or so, making landfall according to the official forecast. Right now, maximum sustained winds of 145 miles an hour. That movement off toward the northwest at 15, and that minimum pressure there, 947 millibars. So again, this is an extremely dangerous situation. We're talking about areas could be uninhabitable here, weeks, months. Just tells a story, that wording there. And we just want people to, again, be really cognizant of what is going on and maybe taking action as necessary. Hurricane warning from San Luis Pass to Intercoastal City there in Louisiana. Tropical storm warnings off toward the east, especially. Some areas already getting those tropical force winds even. You can kind of see some of those just out in toward the Gulf of Mexico on our map, on our imagery. And as we look at some forecast model data, as we get toward 3 a.m., this is when the HRRR is a couple hours behind the official forecast, but we're not concerned necessarily a couple hours here and there, as we just want people to be really cognizant of what's going to happen. And this shows the wind there, that wind pumping in that storm surge. Unfortunately, a Category 4, maybe even stronger hurricane tracking toward Lake Charles. The TV station there, the Gray Station, KPLC 7's already evacuated pretty much all their staff from the city, from that station there, because it's just going to be too dangerous that far inland, because it's going to hold its own pretty much as it gets down here in toward parts of southern Louisiana, because we're not talking about much there, and that's going to allow that storm surge to really come up in toward Lake Charles as well, and cause so many issues. The Weather Service is also evacuated as well, and I know the National Weather Service in Brownsville taking over for them. And then as we look toward that television station there, KPLC 7, the station there in Baton Rouge, WAFB there, yeah, I got that as call letters right there, as we're looking toward Baton Rouge, taking on over with that coverage, as we're looking here, again, just so serious of a situation, as it's going to be an impact there that's going to be worse than what was felt from Rita, it seems like, and that was a storm that knocked out power to some people for months as we were looking into toward that situation. So again, a storm is strengthened. We thought this could happen, but we were hoping it wasn't going to happen. but we wanted people to kind of be aware, and unfortunately the worst has happened here with this scenario. The model really telling the story as we look here, Category 4 or maybe even stronger hurricane making landfall here later tonight, and catastrophic storm surge. You see some of these values of 15 to 20 feet as we get toward areas there in toward parts of southwestern Louisiana. That's just going to cause total devastation. Freeport, Texas, to the mouth of the Mississippi River. You see some of these other areas here, lesser values, luckily, but as we get in toward that hardest hit zone, we're talking, especially, I'll kind of pull up my notes here to make sure I give you the exact information. I know you can kind of see it on the graphic, but I want to make sure I give you the precise details here on what's going to happen. So we have the Johnson Bayou to Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge, including the Calcasieu Lake, 15 to 20 feet of storm surge there, folks. 15 to 20 feet. We have the Sea Rim State Park, the Johnson Bayou, including the Sabine Lake, 10 to 15 feet, and the Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge to Intracoastal City there, 10 to 15 feet of storm surge. So let's kind of recap that. 15 to 20 feet there, Johnson Bayou to Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge, including Calcasieu Lake, 10 to 15 feet, Sea Rim State Park to Johnson Bayou, including Sabine Lake, and 10 to 15 feet for Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge to Intracoastal City. These are numbers that you really just kind of read about. You don't actually expect to have to talk about them here on the air, but this is a real-life situation, a real-life disaster, folks. I mean, it's going to be a humanitarian crisis in southwestern Louisiana. This is the truth. As we look here at the Saffir-Simpson wind scale, we're talking about catastrophic wind damage, 130 to 156 miles per hour there as you get to the Cat 4 and then the Cat 5. You see that there as well, getting in toward just even higher numbers. Again, this is going to have a devastating impact in toward the region. We're going to pop up the radar scope computer before I continue anymore. I want to give you another perspective on what is happening right now for those of you just tuning in. I want to see a different view of this very dangerous major hurricane. The first major hurricane to make landfall since Michael, but it could be one of the strongest major hurricanes in terms of wind speeds we've seen make landfall in the U.S. in recorded history. And the storm surge values, some of the highest we're going to maybe see here in recorded history as well. As we get over toward our radar scope software, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about here with this eye, so well defined. And you can just see here the activity around it as we get down into toward the Gulf of Mexico right now. You see this banding is so significant of a storm. We're going to put on the velocity mode here. You see some of these really strong, destructive, catastrophic, devastating winds off toward the east here. You can kind of see it here. I'm just going to you can see what I'm talking about. I'll just kind of do the same over here. We're just trying to kind of highlight some of this here as we look off toward these areas, off toward these regions here with these winds, as we are just going to see such a destructive impact here in toward parts of southwestern Louisiana, southeastern Texas. If your relatives haven't evacuated and they were urged to do so under mandatory evacuation, just give them a call, maybe try to give them a nudge to do so, because it's just such a serious threat here, folks. This could be one of the worst threats we've seen from a hurricane hitting the U.S. in our lifetime, to be quite honest. I really don't think I'm overstating that. I hope I am. I hope tomorrow we find out this wasn't as bad. I know with Rita, they were thinking it might be worse. It was a situation that it was looking so dire, and then it kind of weakened before landfall. But this one looks like it's going to be pretty much strengthening up to landfall, and that just adds even more insult to injury in terms of the impacts, because you're going to have those winds translating so strong down to the surface, and the storm surge is just going to be unrelenting there. And it's just going to be a tragedy in the ward region. So I'm going to go ahead and pop back on camera now. Again, catastrophic damage expected tonight here in the this region. And as we look at the most likely arrival time for tropical storm winds, of course, we're already getting into some of these here in the this region as time is running out, or even has run out to prepare. In some cases, we're already getting tornado warnings, but still, it's going to be so bad overnight, and you're not going to see anything. It might just still be a good idea to get out before the sun goes down, and it's just going to be so bad of a situation. I know just hearing about stories over the years with these situations at night, this is so harrowing what we are learning from those, and you just got to be really careful Keep in mind that staying in these areas vulnerable to storm surge and even mobile homes are risky as we look inland. That's what we're going to be more concerned about is mobile homes because we could be having tornado-like winds getting pretty far. I know we saw that in the Panhandle with Michael getting pretty far in. You're going to have big issues with those mobile homes being damaged or destroyed as we get, 50 miles inland, for instance, even. That's how disruptive of a situation this could be as we're looking towards some of those areas. And your life, if you choose to stay here, your life could be in danger. Now, as you get further in, maybe not the case. And you got to ignore some of Mississippi here, especially as we're looking over there toward that state. And then some of Texas as well, because we're not going to be seeing the most destructive impacts in those zones. We're talking about a concentrated area, but these are just kind of times that you need to be prepared by or need to prepare by. So just kind of giving that heads up. But we're talking about the areas kind of in the middle of this, where we're talking about the worst impacts, and maybe not really talking about Little Rock, for instance, with the mobile homes being destroyed, unless you have a tornado go through there. But just to kind of clarify this, I do want to let you know what is going on here as we look further down. It's just going to be really bad, and the peak wind gust forecast, I've had to update this as this situation's really evolved here. Lake Charles, we're talking about maybe wind gusts to 150 miles per hour now in toward Calcasieu Paris. As we get over toward southeast Texas, 120 miles per hour is what I have here. And the Weather Service went a little lower in Lake Charles. They went a little higher on Beaumont. But just looking at things, I felt this was the most accurate forecast I could provide you right now as we look toward that region. Luckily, Houston's going to get pretty much spared. They're really lucky because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people really having a storm that's life-changing for them. But if this was going through Houston, we'd be talking about millions of people with a life-changing storm. So it's going to be terrible for areas there, extreme southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana, but Houston's dodging a bullet at least, so that's some good news. And as we look up toward Lufkin, you can see 55 miles per hour is what I have on the peak gusts. I've lowered their value a little, as it looks like the worst is going to be a little east. Some of the models kind of nudging a little east here on some different runs. That increases the threat. They're over toward Alexandria, 75 miles per hour now. That far inland, we're talking about hurricane force gusts there in toward that part of Louisiana. So a lot of power outages. We're talking about more of an Isaias type impact as we get up there, not a situation where you're talking about maybe months without power, but you're talking about still widespread power outages as we get later in toward the period, further up in toward that state. Now, coastal damage here from Hurricane Michael. I know this was Mexico Beach, and I don't show this to you to scare you, but this is probably what some of the damage will be similar to in some regard as we get towards some of those most vulnerable areas. Now, the storm surge actually must be a little bit worse here, a little bit worse with this situation compared to what we saw with Michael. The winds maybe a little bit lesser values in toward the region, but this is going to be so serious as we've emphasized. And this is what Michael did, about 50 miles inland, gust over 100 miles an hour, and power nearly 50% out for about 2 weeks in Jackson County there. Just showing this to you to kind of give you an idea of what some of that inland wind impact could look like there in toward that region. Again, such a sobering situation. You have a pit in your stomach looking at Michael a couple years ago, and now looking at Laura here today. Such a similar situation in a lot of regards. I'm going to check the Hurricane Center right now because we may have an update from them here at about 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central, because they've been sending out updates every hour now as this gets closer. And they're talking about the sustained tropical storm force winds and steady heavy rains moving on in there along the central Louisiana coast. And the sustained wind there about 39 miles an hour recently reported at one of the lakes there, and there as we got toward Vermilion Bay as well. So maximum sustained wind still 145 miles an hour. That movement still there northwest at 15, and the minimum central pressure still 947. Not as low as what Michael was there in terms of that value, but still those wind impacts, those storm surge impacts there are so significant, and that pressure's not really as big of a deal towards some impacts. So we just want, of course, we talk about it. It's important, but as we look here toward that heavy rain impact here, we're going to have some high risk type flash flooding in toward this region, in toward parts of the Lake Charles area, getting maybe over toward Port Arthur, somewhere in that range. As we go back again, that's maybe 18 inches, by the way. As we go over to the radar, we want to show you the radar scope perspective here at this 6 o'clock hour. You see that eye again, it looks like what you see in a meteorological textbook as we get up toward Cameron, Lake Charles here in the path. And I'll kind of measure some things since we're on this right now. We're talking about that eye, how wide it is. And we're looking here about 30 miles or so, I believe. That says 26 as I look on my monitor here. So about 26.7 it seems. I'll zoom in a little bit more just to make sure I'm reading that as we get in, maybe get a little bit more of an accurate measurement in toward this area as we look here at the eye of the storm. Storm again that people in this area aren't going to ever forget. So 25 miles is about what we got as we look here on this, and then as we go to the length of the eye, we're talking about 25 miles as well. So just kind of giving a little perspective here as this moves in, causes flooding, tornado threats in play. Of course, want to have multiple ways to get alerts there as you're inland, as you're already getting some of those warnings, some issues, some damage already as we look towards some of those Paris's, for instance. So again, we're going to be tracking all that for you. We'll be having coverage here as they come back onto camera right now. We'll be having coverage here, extended coverage, as we get later in toward tonight and tomorrow here on all of our platforms to keep you, your family safe, up to date on what is happening with this historic threat, probably starting around 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central, or 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central, somewhere in that 2-hour time range there. We'll be starting our coverage more than likely as the situation does continue to deteriorate. Again, just the flooding threat, even all the way into the heartland there, going to have some issues, maybe with some tornadoes, with some flooding as we're looking toward Paducah, Cape Girardeau, as we get down toward Boot Hill, Missouri as well. So just stay tuned. We'll be getting to that here as we look ahead, but that won't probably be the headline from this storm, or one of the headlines even, as these tornadoes could cause some issues as we look at the enhanced Fujita scale, light damage, moderate damage, and a lot of these, but a few of these could have considerable to severe damage, and they still could be deadly. But again, the high confidence in destruction there as we're looking toward the storm surge and extreme wind zone there in toward the Lake Charles region. Again, Laura is going to be a name. We're not going to be talking about it again in the Atlantic Basin. It's going to be retired here, folks. It's going to be retired, no doubt about it, because of all the destruction it's going to cause here in toward the area that we're talking about. Again, no direct impacts on our weather. That's the good news, but we're going to have to keep an eye on the tropics here, because they're the system we're going to have to pay attention to as we're looking ahead now at 20% chance in that 5-day formation probability as we're looking east there of the Lesser Antilles, and we'll just have to see how the models handle this, as it's too early to get into anything definitive, but just kind of pay attention as we're looking toward Florida, the southeast. I can't really get into anything beyond that right now as we're all focused on Laura here, but something to pay attention to, keep in back of your mind as we look ahead to the start of September, that we could have something to watch there. It could be Nana on the list. So as you saw that next name, as we get back over there, it could be another name. We'll have to be watching the storm that does come from that name. So as we get back over toward our satellite, we're going to wrap this up for now as we get ready for the coverage here later tonight. Again, this storm is just so well defined, so serious here. I just want everybody to take this really seriously in this area that is going to be impacted. Again, you can see it here. You see the tornado warning to the north. There's a tornado watch. I don't think we really covered that enough, so let's go ahead and pop that on just to kind of see. You see some of this action around New Orleans, but this goes all the way up into ward areas that maybe not going to be impacted as much by the hurricane and some of the destructive qualities as we're getting further over in toward eastern Texas. But we're seeing this until it looks like about 9 p.m. Central Time, but I'm sure we'll get an extension as the situation continues to be very serious in toward these spots. So your satellite, again, I mean, you don't need to be a meteorologist to be able to see just how serious of a storm this is as we get that latest look here. It's getting really serious here as we look towards southeastern Texas, southwestern Louisiana with this storm probably going to be making landfall here. It's about 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central right now. We're talking about 1 o'clock Central, so 7 hours, give or take, from landfall here, and that'll be when you're getting some of the worst of the impacts, but some of the impacts already starting to be felt, and they're just going to get worse here throughout the evening. we'll be back here later on with more coverage. Again, you just really want to be cognizant of what is happening there. I mean, if the television station, the one there with the big news operation, KPLC, is evacuating and also getting over toward the National Weather Service, they're evacuating. That just tells you how bad things are going to be in Lake Charles, folks. I mean, they're not evacuating unless there's a storm of a lifetime really in toward that region. The Weather Service just talking here in the chat, the Lake Charles chat here saying that Hurricane Laura continues moving toward the northwest at 15 miles per hour. There was sustained winds of 145 miles per hour, and they're the center. It's still about 150 miles south of Lake Charles. Surge flooding has already pushed in across much of the coastal cities there, with numerous reports of water crossing roadways there from Holly Beach to Intercoastal City, Louisiana. And in the next few hours, we're going to be talking about tropical storm force winds beginning there with hurricane force winds there later this evening and overnight. So things are just going to get worse. We're just at the beginning here, folks. This storm almost has an annular type look to it, which is something you just really don't see here in the Atlantic Basin. It just kind of tells you just how bad of an impact we're going to see. It has some impacts here that we're going to be seeing that we don't see very often in the Atlantic Basin in the United States. But we're just going to have to be getting you through it here, giving you those latest updates. I'll be doing that again as the evening does progress. I'll be here to give you those important details. For now, meteorologist Casey Cloud, thanks so much for tuning in.